morning and welcome to Morning Movie News. On Friday, it was Paramount's turn to make some headlines, and they did so by making their latest casting announcement for the upcoming Terminator Genesis, or as they refer to it themselves in their press release, simply Terminator Reboot. I guess maybe they aren't totally sold on the title Terminator Genesis yet, which I can totally understand, but I kind of want them to just officially call it Terminator Reboot, because I would love to see at least one Hollywood studio in this age of formula, big blockbuster filmmaking, just admit, this is what it is. It's Terminator Reboot. Or why does it need a secondary title? Why isn't it just the new Terminator film? That's what I would go with, although no matter what they call it, it still stars Arnold Schwarzenegger, and it's not a clean break from the first incarnation, and I think that for this truly to succeed, they have to get rid of Arnold, which they're not going to do. So I'm not particularly interested in this franchise. I haven't been since Terminator 2 Judgment Day, one of the best action movies ever made, still to this day, which this franchise is continuing to ride the coattails of years, decades later. But I did like the Sarah Connor Chronicles on Fox, that television show, so it can be done. My interest in this franchise can be sparked. Poor Summer Glau, I wish she was in this film. And they ended on a cliffhanger, but I digress. They're never going back to the Sarah Connor Chronicles, but they are going to go back to the Terminator universe and reboot it. So the big casting announcement was that Matt Smith, the previous Doctor Who, had landed a role. And so this wasn't huge news to me personally because I'm not a Doctor Who fan. So I'm certainly aware of who Doctor Who is, I'm aware of how popular he is, and I'm aware that Matt Smith, as I said, was the last Doctor Who. So I thought it was interesting that they were attaching another television actor to this, which I'll get to in a moment. But what fascinated me more about this story was your guys' reaction to it, and that several of you were either on the same page with me or kind of predicted how I would react. So I thought that was fun. So I have two comments that I pulled from you guys that I want to include in the conversation. The first is from David Valdez on Facebook, who said, "Grace, I can already hear this on Morning Movie News. Not only another British actor landing a role in the U.S., but a TV star going to movies." And then David said, "Too bad it's Friday." Well, it's Monday, and I have to say, I'm going to say half of what you said, what you attributed to me, what you thought I would say was right. Well, half of it wasn't. I have no problem with British actors landing roles in the U.S. I did make a bit of a fuss about Henry Cavill, a British actor playing Superman, because that's such an American hero, an American icon, but he ended up doing a great job. I don't have a big problem with British actors at all. I always am in favor of diversity, and that includes national diversity from different countries, but I'm not against the British angle at all. But I do feel having a TV actor go to this is tough. I mean, clearly they want to bring in the Doctor Who fan base. And I'm sure all the other Doctor Who's are like, what the hell? Remember that, I forget his name, I'm not a Doctor Who fan, but I think David Tennant, and he was in Fright Night with Colin Farrell, which was actually a pretty good movie, by the way. But that's the best he could do on the silver screen, and then Matt Smith lands this Terminator role. Although, I don't think the other Doctor Who's should get jealous just quite yet, because I don't have a lot of faith in this latest Terminator film, or I guess that's exactly what Paramount's trying to combat. It isn't the latest Paramount film, it's the dawn of a new era, hopefully. So anyway, that was the first comment. I like that. So David, thank you for thinking of me when you heard that news. Then, Checkered Flag Gaming said, "Hi Grace, love your show, been watching it for a very long time, every single day. Thank you, Checkered Flag Gaming. I have more of a request than a question, but I would love to hear your thoughts on Emilia Clarke, another TV actress from Game of Thrones, and Matt Smith being confirmed for the Terminator reboot." Excellent, Checkered Flag Gaming. You have caught on to Paramount's plan. You called it the Terminator reboot and not Terminator Genesis. And then he said, and continued, Checkered Flag Gaming continued saying, "A good move, or do you think it needs more star power? Would love to know your reply." Well, thank you for asking. And also, Checkered Flag Gaming says, "I should have a great day," and I hope you're all having a great day as well today. All right, so, yes, star power, big problem for this movie. First of all, they have to combat the black hole of star power, the negative space that is Arnold Schwarzenegger. We've been discussing this quite a bit on this show, especially with the movies he's had come out that have been box office flops. The latest has been Sabotage, the worst of his career. And even some of you are starting to say, I mean, some of you have really been quite defensive of Arnold Schwarzenegger, and he should feel very nice about that, to have sparked such loyalty from his fan base. But I think I'm seeing even the most loyal Arnold Schwarzenegger fans be like, he might really hurt a film going forward, and perhaps Paramount should consider dropping him. But they're not. Maybe he has a stake in the ownership of the property, I'm not sure. But he's on board. The star power overall, beyond Emilia Clarke and Matt Smith from Doctor Who, so you have Game of Thrones and Doctor Who. Now granted, these aren't network television stars, and they certainly come from very popular shows. However, I would also, Game of Thrones has a very large audience. But I would also further elaborate that this isn't like the old network ratings from like the 80s and the 90s when like tens of millions of people would tune in to watch a show. These are cult hits that generate a lot of media coverage, but the studios really, I hope they're doing their due diligence and seeing if they can separate the media noise, the fan noise, from the actual legitimate numbers of how many people are tuning in. So anyway, those are you have Emilia Clarke as Sarah Connor, then Jason Clarke, from no relation, I'm guessing. That's funny. Okay, so Jason Clarke from they reference Zero Dark 30, but he might really raise his star profile this summer with Dawn of the Planet of the Apes. But he's playing John Connor. Matt Smith apparently plays someone with close ties to him, maybe a fellow resistance leader. Then Jai Courtney will be Kyle Reese. Jai Courtney, really, let's think about what this guy was recently in. I interviewed him for Die Hard, A Good Day to Die Hard. He was very nice, but look how poorly that film performed. It did very well overseas, though, so I guess they're looking maybe to that. But then he was most recently in I, Frankenstein. Jai Courtney has a horrible, horrible, horrible box office track record. And I don't know why anybody would be like, let's hire him. So he's also in the film as Kyle Reese. Then you have Deo Okaneye, sorry Deo Okaneye, and he's playing Danny Dyson, the son of Joe Morton's character in Terminator 2. So I think that'll be interesting. And then also the other person they haven't, J.K. Simmons is also in the movie. J.K. Simmons, always great, but certainly not going to bring anybody into the theater. And then also Byung Hun Lee in an unspecified role, although the rumor is he will be the evil Terminator. And I think that's very exciting. That's the casting I'm the most excited for. But even stateside, Byung Hun Lee is coming off of what? Red 2 and the G.I. Joe films? Even there, you don't have a great, group of actors here. Then the other problems are even behind the camera. Alan Taylor, when he went over to Thor: The Dark World, he was the Game of Thrones director. But now he's the director of Thor: The Dark World, which did very well at the box office, obviously, but as we've been discussing with Captain America: The Winter Soldier, that Thor sequel was nowhere on par with the Cap sequel. And it was, I think, a letdown to a lot of people. So if someone said, hey, do you want to see another movie from the director of Thor: The Dark World? You'd be like, maybe, I don't know. He's not returning for Thor 3, is he? And they haven't even announced a Thor 3, I believe. So Alan Taylor, he's directing. And then behind the camera also, furthermore, writing, you have Leda Kalogridis. Now, Leda Kalogridis, she must be great in a room. She must be a really great handling a pitch, because I don't know how she continues to get work. We're talking about someone who on television wrote that Birds of Prey TV series, which I have to admit, I watched it on Netflix or something a couple of years ago, and it was okay, but I think only because I'm a huge Batman fan. I was like, this isn't horrible. Then she wrote The Short-Lived Bionic Woman. Then she wrote Alexander, that Oliver Stone movie with Colin Farrell and Angelina Jolie, which was a laughingstock. And then also Shutter Island, the Martin Scorsese Leonardo DiCaprio pick, which was very atmospheric, but I think even the most diehard fan of the Scorsese-DiCaprio team-up would have to admit it had a lot of problems. Most of all in the script, and I guess that ending like I'd say maybe a third of the way into the film. It's a very convoluted film. So I don't understand. I think this is a whole group of people where it's like the 99 cents bin in Hollywood. I'm just surprised that Paramount would be like, well, who do we want to hire? I know this group, and I'd just be like, really? That's a real ragtag creative team. So Doctor Who's Matt Smith, I think the question isn't so much is it helpful to the film for him to be here, but is it hurtful to him to be involved with the film? Forget about the movie. Can Matt Smith survive starring or co-starring in the Terminator reboot? I think he just wants to get on the board in film. If I certainly was his agent or even just a pal, I'd be like, take the role, Matt Smith, because you need a movie credit, and a very big movie credit. So at the very least, maybe it'll help him jump over into another better film after this. But I just have to say, I'm wondering how you guys feel. I just feel that, regardless of who they cast, it all just seems like people are being cast maybe for the fan group they'll bring in as opposed to their ability to fit the role or as an actor. Those are important aspects. You have to think of this when you have to think of draw when you're casting a film, but still, I feel that shouldn't be your primary goal. That should, maybe it's 50-50. This just to me doesn't seem fresh. It doesn't seem like a reboot. It just seems like another installment in the slowly dying Terminator franchise. Or some of us might argue one that's already dead. All right, so that's the first story of the day. The other thing that a lot of people were talking about on Friday was this Kevin Spacey Call of Duty trailer. It was revealed, and I believe it's called Advanced Warfare. I'm not a gamer either. This is a big day of movie news where I'm kind of a little bit out of my element, so please forgive me if I make any mistakes in my references. But it was revealed that he would be the villain in this new game. I think people knew the game was coming, but they had this big reveal trailer, and they're like, it's Kevin Spacey! He did motion capture. I think they were like, this was captured with the Xbox One or something. And I have to say, when I watched the footage, I was like, I believe this was captured with the gaming system that you could buy in a store for the consumer, rather than the advanced technology that you really should be using for this. I think it's funny that while it has the movements of Kevin Spacey, this animatronic Kevin Spacey, and certainly his face, there's no facial movements in it. You know, it's just the hand gestures basically overall, and it's just like someone wearing a Kevin Spacey mask. But kudos to Kevin Spacey for getting this, and I was impressed with how many people were excited for him to be involved. And, you know, he's playing your typical corporate villain, which he's very good at. And I think the real takeaway for me as a non-gamer with this story is just how awesome Kevin Spacey is at regenerating or revitalizing his own career. Talk about reboots. This is the reboot of Kevin Spacey. He has been a major force behind House of Cards. He has been a very good sport in promoting it. Even when he was at the Oscars, he referenced his character there. He did a little bit. And some other actors might say, oh, that's beneath me. I want to just focus on my being a great actor. I'm not going to do something to advertise my television show. But House of Cards, you know, that's Kevin Spacey's meal ticket. He's experienced not being successful in Hollywood, and I think he's maybe a little more humble and a little bit more savvy. So I think it's great that he did that. And also he did a big thing when Game of Thrones came out. He like made up something with like himself on the throne, and there was like, they reached out to that show instead of feeling they had a competitor. House of Cards was like, come on, everybody, just watch a lot of great TV all at once. We're a part of that, right? Right? I have to admit, sadly, I haven't watched House of Cards Season 2 yet because I just can't get myself to get over to Netflix with all the other good TV on. Perhaps when there's a lull, I'll go and check it out. But that's one of the problems, I think, of this bulk releasing of a show. You know, once you miss the boat or you don't watch it all at once right away, there's nothing prodding you to get back on. You know, it's not a slow-moving train. It's a bullet train, and you know, it zips right past you, and it's easier to miss. But anyway, so not only does he have House of Cards, which he's been doing, but now he's going and doing this video game. And I think he's just really making sure he gets himself out there, keeps himself relevant, and also relevant with the fanboy base, making sure that he's on their radar. And I think that'll maybe help him further down the line. So who knows what'll be next for Kevin Spacey. But I have a pretty good idea that whatever is next, he'll be a crucial element in making it happen. So I love seeing actors take charge of their own careers. It's crucial, even more so, you know, in the old studio system, the studios took care of it, but they also probably put a bunch of drugs in your food and were really mean to you. So I guess, you know, both sides have their ups and downs, their pluses and minuses. But Kevin Spacey is just the latest Hollywood talent to take matters into his own hands and to benefit a lot from those efforts. So good for him. Even though I have to say, you know, I know a lot of people really like video games, but I think that they're a long way away from being movie quality. Even with The Last of Us. I know a lot of you are big Last of Us fans, but I thought the cinematics had the similar problem where there's no facial movements. I don't understand why they make so much money off of these games, why they won't invest in having the facial movements in the characters. Because I think it just takes you out a little bit. Maybe they'll be able to bring even more people in. But again, they're making so much money, what do they care about bringing in new players? All right, so the third story of the day is that yet another 60s television show is going to make it to the big screen. And this time it's Green Acres. Now, Green Acres is one of the lesser known 60s television shows. I think it's best known for its theme song and Eva Gabor as the co-star, you know, sister of Zsa Zsa Gabor. But it's from the group of shows like Gilligan's Island, which is also becoming a movie with Josh Gad. Man from U.N.C.L.E. is coming up with Henry Cavill and Armie Hammer. Guy Ritchie is directing. And then we've already had Get Smart, which was successful, very successful. Bewitched, not successful. But they did a very odd take on that, where they they were making a movie about Bewitched. It just didn't work out. I think they got too meta. And then also, of course, the Beverly Hillbillies, which I think is the closest to Green Acres. And that, of course, was with Ernest. He was starring in that, and that did okay. I believe they made 2 of those. But anyway, Green Acres, if you're not familiar with the television show, it's about a New York couple, like a really glamorous, wealthy New York couple who have to go and relocate to Middle America. And it's kind of like the fish out of water comedy that ensues. So I think this could actually maybe be very interesting if they adapt this, and it has the potential to be the most timely. And I think it's even more appropriate to today's environment because of the Main Street versus Wall Street mentality that has arisen out of the 1%, the 99%. Oh, I can't believe I forgot their whole slogan. Those guys, the Wall Street people who were protesting. Wow, talk about bad PR. But anyway, I do remember Wall Street versus Main Street. I thought that was a fantastic way to picture it. So I think that Green Acres could really address that like never before. And so if this is a light comedy that's maybe willing to have a little more serious undercurrent to it, or be storyline, and be somewhat of a commentary, I think you could actually have something very interesting on their hands here. So if they're pitching this as a feature film, they're developing it. So if I were at a studio, if I was a development executive and they brought me Green Acres, I might even actually, I like this idea so much, I might even call them. I'd be like, I'm interested in your Green Acres property, but I want to be able to actually give some weight to it and have the comedy in there, but I do want to address this kind of Wall Street versus Main Street mentality that everybody's dealing with these days. They also want to make it a Broadway play. Basically, somebody got the rights to Green Acres and they're trying to see what they can do with it. So we'll see what happens. It's being shopped around both as a feature film and a play. Either way, I think it could work if they take on that more serious tone. But I'm curious to what you guys think. Do you want to see that? Do you want to see a more serious Green Acres? Have any of you ever seen Green Acres? Or do you desire to see a film or play version of Green Acres? And what do you think of this trend of 60s television shows making it to the big screen? Do you want to see a Gilligan's Island movie? Or do you think this is just, or do you think they'll have a Get Smart here, which is the only one that's really succeeded so far? Even the Flintstones didn't work out. Or do you think this is another Bewitched and Beverly Hillbillies, etc.? So that's the third story of the day. Now on to the viewer question. Now this is from Ian Askew, and Ian says, question: Are the R-rated comic heroes? Yes, here we go. Are the R-rated comic heroes done for? I think his autocorrect said don't for. All right, are they done for? I loved Blade, Punisher, Constantine, and although Spawn wasn't that great, they should try it again. I understand why most comic movies are PG. I believe they're mostly PG-13, actually, Ian. But what about The Crown that needs a little more, The Crowd? Oh, your autocorrect is killing both of us, Ian. But what about The Crowd that needs a little more once in a while? I watch every episode of your show, and I like this. Even after I disagreed with you about Justice League War. I really disliked that animated movie, and apparently Ian did. But it didn't keep him from tuning in, and I appreciate that, Ian. I appreciate that we can just have a spirited discussion. And he said, have a great day, and he left me, instead of a smiley face, he left me a tank. So that was awesome. All right, so Ian basically wants to know, will they ever see any more R-rated comic book movies? Why do they have to all be PG-13? What about that fan base? And I would say to you that you're never going to have a comic book movie that isn't PG-13. It would be just really bad business on the part of the studio to block off an audience like that. It's very hard for an R-rated movie to get the kind of box office numbers that these movies are getting. And also they need to get it not just because they need to compete with the other comic book movies and get that headline, and they don't want to, they don't want to underperform, but these have such massive budgets, they need to make this much money to recoup their costs. Not only budgets for making the film, but advertising costs. So they need to make as much money as possible, and the way to do that is to have the widest audience. Now, that's why they're PG-13. PG, I think, would be going too far in the other direction. They wouldn't have enough action, but I think PG-13 is the way to go to satisfy everybody, to have a really expansive, broad audience, but at the same time, just go dark enough to please your older fans. And, of course, come on, what kid doesn't remember the dark movies they saw when they were little? Those are the ones that stick with you. So I think Ian, to answer your question, it's very unlikely. And if you were to see an R-rated comic book movie, it would have to be one that had a very low budget. Now, speaking of that, that's where I think things get interesting. Let's head over to Marvel's Netflix deal, which is, they are spending a lot of money on that, but certainly not what they would spend on a feature film. This is where I think you see a great opportunity to see that kind of R-rated action. Netflix can do whatever they want, and I think they need to. They need to be able to compete with HBO and Showtime and all these really shows that are pushing the edge of the envelope themselves to compete and be competitive in that space. I think people have different expectations when they tune into a television show now these days, one of these prestige television shows, than they go to a movie. Maybe it's because they watch it in the privacy of their own home. I'm not quite sure what the reasoning is, but on Game of Thrones, that would be a hard R, perhaps even an NC-17 if you were to release it in theaters, and that hasn't hurt it one bit. People actually love that aspect of the show. So Netflix, in order to be competitive in that space, needs to have those same elements, and that's why I think they picked the heroes that they did, the Defenders, your Daredevil, your Luke Cage, your Jessica Jones, and your Iron Fist. They're Hell's Kitchen in New York City. They're a great group of people, and as you might recall, even the comics, this is the ones that had the Marvel Knights titles, and Jessica Jones had a Marvel Max title, and I think they, at some point Daredevil might have had one. Punisher certainly did. He might show up in this universe. You never know. So I think because he's in that group. And so this is like, even with Marvel Comics, this was this group of heroes that had a more adult storyline. They were able to push further and grittier and darker, more noir, and more vulgar and obscene and more violent. And so I think that this is where you'll see it. I think that's what Marvel is going to do. And it'll be a great way for them to differentiate this part of their cinematic universe from what you're seeing on the big screen, and also raise interest in it. Be like, well, this might be on the small screen, but it's darker and it's the violence you can't get, and it's the sexiness that you can't get in our other movies, and they are, not our other movies, our movies. So I think that if Marvel's smart, that's what they'll do. That's how they'll utilize their Netflix deal. So Ian, while you won't get what you're looking for on the big screen, I think there's a very good chance you'll be getting it on the small screen via Netflix and Marvel. So I'm curious, does that scratch the itch for you, Ian? Everybody else? Do you want to see that R-rated comic book movie? Can it be done? Can you find that sweet spot where the budget is a low enough place where you can make that R-rated comic book movie? Do you even want an R-rated comic book movie? And do you think that Netflix, the Marvel Netflix deal, should go into that territory? Or do you think Marvel would be wrong to have any corner of their cinematic universe go dark, considering how family-friendly it is right now? All right, so that's today's morning movie news. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you for your question, Ian. Everybody, please write down below what you think of today's top 3 stories, the viewer question, what you'd like to see covered tomorrow, and any questions that you might have. All right, thanks for watching. Bye.